He held the clippers in his hand, the vibrations humming against his palm like a dark promise. At that moment, Sergeant Ronan Blaine didn't see a human being in front of him. He saw a conquest. He saw someone he could break. But arrogance is a blindfold, and Ronan was wearing it tight. He didn't know that the hair falling to the cold linoleum floor wasn't just a violation of civil rights. It was the countdown to his own destruction. Because the woman trembling in that chair wasn't a criminal. She was the one woman in the entire state with the power to end him. Minutes. That's all it took for the predator to become the prey. This is the story of how a badge became a bullseye. The rain didn't just fall. It hammered against the asphalt of Highway 9 like judgment. It was the kind of storm that turned the world gray and blurred the lines between the road and the ditch. Inside her charcoal gray Lexus, Serena Voss gripped the steering wheel with a practiced calmness. She was with skin the color of deep mahogany and a presence that usually commanded silence in crowded rooms. But tonight, she was just a driver late for a crucial engagement, battling a failing windshield wiper and the treacherous slickness of the Georgia back roads. She wasn't wearing her robes. Those were folded neatly in a garment bag hanging in the back seat, shrouded in plastic. Today she was dressed in a simple beige trench coat over a tracksuit. She had been at a physical therapy appointment for her hip, a nagging injury from her days as a track star, and the session had run late. She checked the digital clock on the dashboard. "Damn it," she whispered, her voice low and smooth. She was due at the district courthouse. It wasn't just any docket. Today was the preliminary hearing for the state versus Thorne corruption case. The media would be there. The district attorney would be there. She could not be late. She pressed her foot slightly harder on the accelerator. The Lexus hummed, pushing past the speed limit in a zone. It was a minor infraction, the kind usually forgiven in a torrential downpour when everyone is just trying to get home or get to work. But Sergeant Ronan Blaine wasn't interested in forgiveness. He was parked behind a billboard for a divorce attorney, his cruiser idling like a dormant beast. Blaine was a man who wore his uniform a size too tight, emphasizing the bulk of his arms. He had a reputation in the precinct. Some called him the Hammer. Others, behind his back, called him the Liability. He had excessive force complaints alone, all of which had mysteriously vanished from his permanent record, thanks to a union rep who played golf with the chief. Blaine took a sip of lukewarm coffee and squinted through the rain. He saw the Lexus blur past. Expensive car, dark tint. "Gotcha," he muttered. He didn't check the speed on his radar. He didn't need to. In Blaine's mind, the car itself was probable cause. He flipped the switch. The cruiser exploded into lights, red and blue slashing through the gray storm. Serena saw the lights in her rearview mirror immediately. She didn't panic. She was a woman of the law. She respected the procedure. She signaled, slowed down, and pulled over onto the muddy shoulder, the gravel crunching under her tires. She lowered the window as the officer approached. The rain whipped into the car, soaking the leather armrest. She kept her hands on the wheel, visible and open. Blaine walked up to the window, his hand resting instinctively on his holster. He didn't lean in. He stood tall, letting the rain pelt his wide-brimmed hat, looking down at her through mirrored aviators that he refused to take off despite the gloom. "License and registration?" he barked. "No good morning? No. Do you know why I pulled you over?" Serena turned her head slightly. "Good morning, officer. Is there a problem?" "I asked for your license and registration. I didn't ask for a conversation." His voice was a serrated edge. Serena paused. She had seen this demeanor 1,000 times from the bench. The aggression, the assumption of dominance. She reached slowly toward her purse on the passenger seat. "I am reaching for my identification," she narrated calmly. "Hurry it up," he snapped. He shone his flashlight into the car, the beam cutting across her face, then sweeping into the back seat. The beam caught the garment bag. "What's in the bag?" "Work clothes," Serena said, handing him her license. Blaine snatched the card from her damp fingers. He looked at it. Serena Voss. The address was in an affluent neighborhood, one that Blaine couldn't afford on his salary. This irritated him. He looked back at her. A black woman in a Lexus living in Kings Creek with an attitude he perceived as uppity because she wasn't trembling. "Get out of the car," Blaine said. Serena frowned, her brow furrowing. "Excuse me, for a speeding violation?" "I smell narcotics," Blaine lied. It was his go-to line. It was unprovable in the moment and gave him carte blanche. "Step out of the vehicle now." "Officer," Serena said, her voice hardening with the authority she usually reserved for overruling objections. I don't care if you're the Queen of Sheba," Blaine shouted, ripping the door open. "Get your ass out of the car." He grabbed her by the arm, his fingers digging into the fabric of her trench coat. He yanked. Serena stumbled out into the mud, the rain instantly soaking her hair. Her hair was styled in intricate, beautiful braids that she had just had done. They were pulled back into a dignified bun. Blaine spun her around, slamming her chest against the side of the wet car. "Officer, this is a mistake," Serena said, wincing as the cold metal pressed against her cheek. "Check my license again. I am Judge Serena Voss." The wind howled, swallowing her words. Or perhaps Blaine chose not to hear them. "Judge." Blaine laughed, a harsh barking sound. "Yeah, and I'm the police commissioner. You shut your mouth." He kicked her legs apart, spread them. He patted her down aggressively, his hands lingering too long, too rough. He found nothing but a phone and keys. He spun her back around, and that's when he saw her hair. He stared at the braids with a strange, twisted fascination. "You got something hidden in there?" Blaine sneered, poking a finger into the bun. "We found a lot of girls hiding razors and dope in these things." "Do not touch my hair," Serena said, her eyes locking onto his. It was a direct order. Blaine's face turned a shade of crimson. He wasn't used to being told what to do, not by suspects, not on the side of the road. "You're resisting," he stated flatly. "I am standing perfectly still," Serena countered. "You're resisting," Blaine roared. He swept her legs, knocking her into the mud. She gasped as the sludge soaked her coat. Before she could push herself up, a knee was in her back, driving the air from her lungs. "You're under arrest for resisting arrest, disorderly conduct, and suspicion of possession." Blaine recited the litany as he ratcheted the handcuffs onto her wrists, tight enough to bruise bone. He dragged her up, mud dripping from her face, her expensive coat ruined. He shoved her towards the cruiser. "You're going to regret this," Serena said quietly. It wasn't a threat. It was a verdict. "The only thing I regret," Blaine spat, shoving her head down into the back seat of the cage, "is that I have to clean your mud off my seats." The ride to the precinct was a blur of silence and static. Serena sat in the back, upright despite the handcuffs biting into her wrists. She began to catalog everything. Officer badge number. Probable cause. Fabricated odor of narcotics. Use of force. Excessive. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply to control her heart rate. She had a distinct advantage. Blaine hadn't run her name through the central database yet. If he had, the system would have flagged her as a member of the judiciary immediately. He was too arrogant, too sure that she was just another nobody he could bully. They arrived at the station, a grim brick building that smelled of stale coffee and industrial cleaner. Blaine hauled her out of the car and marched her through the back entrance. The booking area was quiet. The desk sergeant, a tired-looking man named Declan Novak, looked up from his computer. "What you got, Ronan?" Novak asked, eyeing the muddy, dignified woman. "Resisting possible possession," Blaine said, throwing Serena's license on the counter. "Check the car later. I bet she tossed it." "I need to make a phone call," Serena said clearly. "I am entitled to my one call." "You'll get your call when I'm done processing you," Blaine sneered. He pushed her toward a holding bench. "Sit." Novak picked up the license. He frowned, squinting at the name. Ronan." "Not now. I gotta get this one cleaned up. She's a hygiene risk." "Hygiene risk?" Serena stood up. "I am perfectly clean." Blaine walked up to her, invading her personal space. He looked at her braids again. They were wet and muddy from where he had shoved her into the ground. "I see lice," Blaine lied loudly. He looked around the room, performing for the other officers. "You see that? White specks, lice. We can't put her in a cell with the general pop like that. It's a health code violation." "That is mud," Serena said, her voice shaking with suppressed rage. "From your boot." "It's lice," Blaine insisted. A dark idea formed in his mind. He had done this once before to a homeless man who had spat on him. It was the ultimate humiliation. We got to sanitize her. He grabbed her arm and dragged her toward a side room used for showers and delousing. "Ronan, wait a minute," Novak called out, standing up. "You might want to look at this." "Process the paperwork, Novak." Blaine slammed the door to the side room, locking it. The room was tiled in white, cold and clinical. In the center was a metal chair. On the counter, a set of heavy-duty electric clippers sat charging. Blaine shoved Serena into the chair. He didn't uncuff her. "Officer?" Serena said, and for the first time there was a crack of genuine fear in her voice, not for her life, but for her dignity. "If you do this, there is no coming back. Listen to me. I am a superior court judge." Blaine paused. He looked at her for a second. Doubt flickered in his eyes, but then he looked at her tracksuit, the mud, the desperate look in her eyes. "A judge?" "Yeah, right. A judge wouldn't be crying about a traffic ticket. A judge wouldn't be driving alone on the back roads. She was lying. They always lied. And I'm the executioner," Blaine muttered. He picked up the clippers. He flipped the switch. The buzzing sound filled the small tiled room like a swarm of angry hornets. "Please," Serena whispered, "don't." Blaine didn't hesitate. He grabbed a handful of her long, intricate braids. He jammed the clippers against her scalp. The sound of hair being severed is distinct, a crunching, tearing sound. Serena squeezed her eyes shut. Tears, hot and fast, streaming down her cheeks, mixing with the drying mud. She didn't scream. She wouldn't give him that satisfaction. She sat stoically as the clippers roared. Blaine worked with brutal efficiency. He didn't just trim. He shaved. He gouged. He cut down to the scalp, leaving patches of skin exposed. Great clumps of braided hair, which had taken hours to style and years to grow, fell onto her shoulders and slid to the floor. It took minutes. When he was done, Serena Voss was unrecognizable. Her head was unevenly shorn, vulnerable and bare. The floor was covered in the wreckage of her identity. Blaine turned off the clippers. He blew the hair off the blades with a smug puff of breath. "There," he said, admiring his handiwork. Now you're clean." He unlocked the handcuffs. "Get washed up. I'm throwing you in the tank." He opened the door and stepped out, expecting high fives from the guys, but the booking room was dead silent. Declan Novak was standing by the door, his face pale as a sheet. Next to him was the precinct captain, Captain Tariq Lang, who had just walked in. Lang was staring at Blaine with a look of pure, unadulterated horror. "What?" Blaine asked, wiping his hands on his pants. "She had lice. I followed protocol." Captain Lang didn't speak to Blaine. He looked past him into the small tiled room where Serena sat, staring at her reflection in the metal towel dispenser. "Oh my God," Lang whispered. He rushed into the room, taking off his jacket. Judge Voss, I am so sorry." Blaine froze. The blood drained from his face so fast it left him dizzy. "Judge." Lang gently draped his jacket over Serena's shoulders. She stood up slowly. She reached up and touched her bare scalp. Her hand trembled. Then she lowered her hand and turned to face the room. Her eyes were dry now. The tears were gone. In their place was a cold, hard fire that could burn the world down. She looked at Blaine. He shrank back, the clippers still in his hand. "Captain Lang," Serena said, her voice raspy but steady. "I have a hearing to preside over. The Thorne corruption case. Ma'am, we need to get you to a hospital or—" "No." She cut him off. "I need a car. I need to get to my courtroom now." "But Judge," Lang looked at her head. "I said now," she commanded. She walked past Blaine. She didn't look at him. She didn't need to. He was already a ghost to her. Blaine stood there, the buzzing of the clippers still echoing in his ears, though they were turned off. He looked at Novak. Novak shook his head slowly and turned away, picking up the phone. "You better call your union rep, Ronan," Novak said softly. "But I don't think he's going to answer." The silence in the precinct booking room was heavy, a suffocating blanket that seemed to trap the air in everyone's lungs. Sergeant Ronan Blaine stood frozen, his hands still cramping from the grip he'd held on the clippers. He watched as Captain Tariq Lang escorted Judge Serena Voss out the side door, her head held high despite the jagged, raw patches where her hair used to be. As the heavy metal door clicked shut, the spell broke. "You are a dead man walking," Novak said from the desk. He didn't say it with malice. He said it with the flat, objective tone of a coroner pronouncing a time of death. Blaine spun around, his face flushing a deep, blotchy purple. "She resisted, Novak. You saw the lice. I was following health protocol, Section 4, Paragraph B." "There were no lice, Ronan," Novak said, typing rapidly on his keyboard. "And even if there were, you call a medic. You don't play barber with a suspect. Especially not when the suspect is the presiding judge of the Superior Court." Blaine felt a cold knot of nausea twist in his gut. He scrambled for his phone. He needed to call Declan Riley, the union representative who had buried his last excessive force complaints. His fingers were slippery with sweat as he dialed. Pick up, he hissed, pacing the small room. Voicemail. "Declan, it's Ronan. I got a situation. A 1099. You need to get down here now. It's bad. They're saying she's a judge. Call me." He hung up and looked at the clippers sitting on the counter. Tufts of black hair were still stuck in the teeth of the blade. Evidence. Panic, sharp and irrational, seized him. He grabbed a paper towel and began frantically wiping the clippers down, then scooped the hair from the floor into a ball. He needed to get rid of it. If there was no hair, maybe he could claim she came in like that. Maybe he could claim she did it herself in a psychotic break. Stop it, Novak barked. Don't you touch that evidence. The cameras are rolling, you idiot. Blaine looked up at the corner of the room. The CCTV camera blinked its red eye, recording every pathetic second of his attempted cover-up. He dropped the hair, his knees gave way, and he slumped into the plastic chair where Serena had sat just moments before. Meanwhile, in the back of Captain Tariq Lang's unmarked Ford Explorer, the atmosphere was feral. Lang drove with white-knuckled intensity, his eyes darting between the rain-slicked road and the rearview mirror where Serena sat. He had cranked the heat up, trying to stop the shivering that had seized her body now that the adrenaline was fading. "Judge Voss," Lang said, his voice thick with regret. "We are from the hospital. Please, let me take you there. We need to document the injuries. You need to be examined." "No hospital," Serena said. Her voice was brittle, like dry leaves. She was staring out the window at the passing gray blur of the Georgia landscape. "Courthouse main entrance." "Judge, you can't go in there like this," Lang pleaded. "The press is there for the Thorne trial. It's a zoo. Channel 5, CNN. Everybody. They'll see." "They will see exactly what your officer did to me," Serena interrupted, turning her gaze to the back of Lang's head. Her eyes were dark voids. "Do you want to hide it, Captain? Do you want to sneak me in the back door so the department can spin a story before I take the bench?" Lang flinched. "No, ma'am. That's not... I'm trying to protect your dignity." "My dignity?" Serena let out a short, mirthless laugh. "My dignity is currently on the floor of your booking room, Captain. What I have left is my duty, and I will not let a thug with a badge keep me from my courtroom. Drive." Lang nodded, defeated. He hit the lights, the sirens wailing as they cut through the morning traffic. Serena reached up and touched her scalp again. It felt alien, rough, cold. She closed her eyes and saw the image of her grandmother, who had spent hours braiding Serena's hair on the front porch when she was a child. Braids were not just hair. They were history. They were patience. They were a crown. "He took my crown," she thought. But he forgot that a queen doesn't need a crown to rule. She needs a sword. The car screeched to a halt in front of the grandiose steps of the county courthouse. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the crowd was massive. Reporters huddled under umbrellas, camera crews were setting up boom mics, and protesters for the Thorne case were chanting near the barricades. As the police car stopped, the crowd turned. They expected the defendant, billionaire developer Harlan Thorne. Instead, Captain Tariq Lang stepped out. He walked to the back door and opened it. The flashbulbs erupted like a lightning storm. Serena Voss stepped out. A hush rippled through the crowd, starting from the front and spreading backward like a wave. They knew Judge Voss. They knew her for her sharp blazers, her stern demeanor, and her immaculate braided bun. The woman who stepped out was wearing a mud-stained tracksuit. Her face was swollen slightly on the left side, and her head was shaved, uneven, jagged, with patches of scalp showing through the dark fuzz. She looked like a prisoner of war. Is that the judge?" a reporter whispered near the front. "Oh my God," someone else gasped. Serena didn't shield her face. She didn't hurry. She stood by the car door for a brief second, letting the cameras capture every inch of the violation. She looked directly into the lens of the Channel 5 camera. Her expression was unreadable, stone cold, terrifyingly calm. Then she began to walk up the stairs. Captain Lang tried to walk beside her, offering an arm, but she waved him off. She walked alone. The crowd parted. No one shouted questions. The shock was too absolute. The sound of her sneakers squelching on the wet concrete was the only sound loud enough to compete with the distant thunder. She reached the heavy oak doors, pushed them open, and disappeared into the sanctuary of the law. The courtroom was packed. The air conditioning was humming, battling the humidity brought in by the damp coats of the spectators. At the defense table sat Harlan Thorne, a man who wore three-piece suits that cost more than most people's cars. He was leaning back, whispering a joke to his lead attorney, a shark named Silas Novak. They were confident. They had paid off witnesses. They had buried evidence. They expected a procedural hearing today, a few motions, and then a delay. "Where is she?" Thorne checked his gold Rolex. "Can we move for a dismissal based on judicial negligence?" "Patience, Harlan," Novak smirked. "Maybe she got a flat tire." The side door to the bench opened. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. The room stood up in a rustle of fabric. Judge Serena Voss walked in. She wasn't wearing her judicial robes. She hadn't had time to go to her chambers. She hadn't even gone to the bathroom to wash the mud off her cheek. She walked up the steps to the high bench wearing her ruined tracksuit. Her head shaved and exposed to the fluorescent lights. The gasp that went through the courtroom was audible. It sounded like the air being sucked out of the room. Harlan Thorne's jaw dropped. Silas Novak froze, his pen hovering over his notepad. The jury, who had been selected for the preliminary hearing, stared in open-mouthed horror. Serena didn't look at the crowd. She walked to her leather chair and sat down. She arranged her files. She took a sip of water from the glass mug. Then she picked up the gavel. Bam! The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. "Court is now in session," Serena said. Her voice was amplified by the microphone, booming and steady. "The Honorable Judge Serena Voss presiding. We are here for the matter of the state versus Harlan Thorne." Silas Novak was the first to recover. He was a lawyer. He knew an opportunity when he saw one. He stood up slowly. "Your Honor," Novak said, his voice dripping with faux concern. "May I approach the bench? The defense is concerned. You appear to have been in an accident. Are you fit to preside today? Perhaps we should reschedule." He was implying she was unstable. He was trying to create a record for an appeal. Serena looked down at him. Her eyes were two dark tunnels. "The court is fit, Mr. Novak," she said. "The court is awake. The court is ready." "But with all due respect, Your Honor," Novak pressed, gesturing to her head. "Your appearance, it is highly irregular. It suggests a traumatic event. My client has a right to a fair trial presided over by a judge in a sound state of mind." "Mr. Novak," Serena said, her voice dropping an octave, "my appearance is the result of an interaction with law enforcement this morning on my way to this courthouse. I was detained, I was assaulted, and I was forcibly shaved by an officer of the peace without due process." A murmur of shock exploded in the gallery. Reporters began typing furiously on their phones. "However," Serena continued, cutting through the noise, "the Constitution does not require a judge to have hair. It requires a judge to have a brain, a conscience, and a knowledge of the law. I possess all three. Now, unless you have a motion regarding the law, you will sit down." Novak opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at Thorne, who was pale. They realized with dawning horror that they weren't facing a distracted judge. They were facing a judge who had just walked through fire and was currently burning with a cold, focused rage. "I withdraw," Novak muttered, sitting down. "Good," Serena said. "Now the prosecution has filed a motion to introduce the encrypted hard drives found in Mr. Thorne's safe. The defense has moved to suppress this evidence." She opened the file in front of her. I have reviewed the warrants, Serena said. I have reviewed the chain of custody. She looked at Thorne for a second. Thorne felt like Blaine. He felt small. Mr. Novak, your argument for suppression relies on the idea that the police acted with excessive zeal and violated privacy boundaries, Serena said. Yes, Your Honor. Novak nodded. I have a newfound appreciation for the concept of excessive zeal, Serena said dryly. The courtroom remained deadly silent. However, the law is specific. The warrant was valid. The evidence is admissible. Motion to suppress is denied. Bam. Next motion. For hours, Serena Voss dismantled the defense's strategy with the precision of a surgeon. She was sharper, faster, and more ruthless than she had ever been. She didn't take a break. She didn't drink water. She channeled every ounce of her trauma into the strict, unyielding application of justice. By the time she banged the gavel for the recess, Harlan Thorne looked sick. His high-priced defense was in tatters. Court is in recess, Serena announced. She stood up. The room stood with her. As she turned to leave, the bailiff, a young man who had worked with her, opened the door for her. Judge, he whispered, his eyes wet. I'm so sorry. Serena paused. She touched his shoulder gently. Don't be sorry, she said. Just get me the district attorney on the line and tell Captain Lang I want to see him in my chambers now. Back at the precinct, the atmosphere had shifted from panic to a siege mentality. Blaine was sitting in the break room, isolated. Nobody sat near him. The TV on the wall was tuned to the local news. The screen showed the footage of Serena walking up the courthouse steps. The headline in bold red letters screamed, Judge Voss assaulted by police, presides over trial with shaved head. Oh, God, Blaine moaned, putting his head in his hands. The door to the break room burst open. It wasn't the union rep. It wasn't Captain Lang. It was two officers from Internal Affairs. They weren't the local guys Blaine knew. They were suits from the State Bureau of Investigation. Sergeant Ronan Blaine, the lead agent asked. He was a tall man with a face like granite. I want my rep, Blaine stammered, standing up. Your rep can meet you downtown, the agent said. He pulled out a pair of handcuffs. You are under arrest. Arrest? Blaine shrieked. For what? It was a mistake. Procedure. We just watched the body cam footage from the cloud server, Ronan, the agent said, stepping forward. We saw you turn off the audio. We saw you drag a superior court judge into a delousing room. And we heard her identify herself. The agent spun around. The metal cuffs clicked. You're being charged with aggravated assault, false imprisonment, deprivation of rights under color of law, and battery. Blaine was marched out of the break room. As he walked through the bullpen, the same path he had dragged Serena through, the other officers didn't look away. They stared. They stared with disgust. He wasn't one of them anymore. He was the cancer they were cutting out. This is crazy, Blaine yelled as they shoved him toward the exit. I'm a cop. You can't do this. You're not a cop anymore, Ronan, Novak called out from the desk, holding up a piece of paper. The chief just faxed this over. You're fired. Effective immediately. Blaine was shoved into the back of a state trooper's car. The seat was hard plastic. The cage was tight. As the car pulled away, Blaine looked out the window. It was still raining. He saw his reflection in the glass. He looked small. He was about to find out that the booking process was a lot less fun when you were on the other side of the counter. And unlike Serena Voss, he wouldn't have the dignity to withstand it. But the real twist was waiting for him at the county jail. The county jail was a different world from the precinct. The precinct was blue tiles and the smell of coffee. The jail was gray concrete, steel bars, and the smell of unwashed bodies mixed with industrial bleach. Ronan Blaine was processed. He knew the procedure. He had sent hundreds of men here, but experiencing it was a violation he wasn't prepared for. Shoes off, belt off, turn around, spread your cheeks, cough. The intake officer was a man named Declan Novak. Blaine knew him. They had grabbed beers after a softball game. "Declan, come on, man," Blaine whispered, shivering in his boxers on the cold floor. "It's me, Ronan." Novak didn't look him in the eye. He kept his face blank, staring at a clipboard. "Face the wall, inmate Alpha. Do not speak unless spoken to." "Inmate," Blaine's voice cracked. "I'm a sergeant. I'm in protective custody, right? You gotta put me in PC. You can't put me with the pops." Novak finally looked up. There was no pity in his eyes, only a dull resignation. "PC is full, Ronan. We got a renovation going on in C Block. Warden says we have to hold you in the temporary intake tank until a solitary cell opens up." The intake tank. Blaine felt his bladder weaken. "Declan, you can't. That's a death sentence. Half the guys in there are guys I collared." "Should have thought of that before you shaved a judge," Novak said coldly. He tossed an orange jumpsuit at Blaine. It smelled of stale sweat. "Get dressed and keep your head down. Maybe nobody will recognize you without the uniform." But Blaine knew better. A cop carries a scent, an aura of arrogance that doesn't wash off with a shower. They marched him down the long, echoing corridor. The sounds of the jail grew louder, shouting, banging on bars, the rhythmic thud of dominoes. They reached the intake tank, a large cell holding men who were waiting for bail hearings or transfer. Novak unlocked the gate. "Step in." Blaine hesitated. "Step in," Novak ordered, placing a hand on his taser. Blaine stepped in. The gate clanged shut behind him with a sound of finality that echoed in his marrow. The noise in the cell didn't stop, but it shifted. Pairs of eyes turned towards the fresh meat. Blaine walked to the nearest corner, keeping his back to the wall, trying to make himself small. He, who had always been the biggest man in the room, was suddenly a child in a den of wolves. He scanned the faces. He recognized a drug dealer he'd busted on 4th Street. He saw a car thief he'd roughed up in an alley. They were looking at him, squinting, trying to place him. Then a shadow fell over him. Blaine looked up. Standing in front of him was a mountain of a man, dark skin, dreadlocks tied back, a scar running down his cheek. Blaine's heart stopped. Darius Hale. Blaine had arrested him for aggravated assault. During the arrest, Blaine had broken Darius's wrist while handcuffing him. Darius stared down at Blaine. He tilted his head. Well, Darius rumbled, his voice like gravel in a mixer. "If it ain't Sergeant Ronan, the hammer." The cell went silent. The dominoes stopped clicking. The murmurs ceased. Every head turned. "I'm not," Blaine stammered, his hands shaking. "Don't lie to me, pig." Darius smiled, revealing a gold tooth. "I never forget a face, especially the face of the man who snapped my wrist like a twig." He stepped closer. Blaine pressed himself against the cold cinder blocks, wishing he could dissolve. "You ain't got your badge now, do you?" Darius whispered. "You ain't got your gun. You ain't got your boys." Blaine closed his eyes, waiting for the fist, waiting for the pain. "Hey," a voice cut through the tension. It came from the bench on the other side of the cell. A thin, older man was sitting there reading a tattered paperback book. He stood up slowly. It was Harlan Novak, the homeless man Blaine had shaved for fun. Harlan walked over, limping slightly. The other inmates parted for him. Harlan had a strange sort of respect in the tank. He was a jailhouse lawyer, a man who helped others with their paperwork. Harlan stood next to Darius and looked down at Blaine. He looked at Blaine's terror-stricken face. Then he looked at Blaine's hair, thick, brown, styled with gel that was now failing. "Is this him?" Darius asked Harlan. "The one you told us about, the barber?" Harlan nodded slowly. "That's him." Darius cracked his knuckles. "So, we handle this right now." Blaine whimpered. "Please, I have money, I can—" "Shut up," Harlan said softly. He looked Blaine in the eye. "You shaved my head, Ronan. You remember? It was winter. I got frostbite on my ears because I lost my hat in the scuffle and you took my hair. I almost died of hypothermia that night." "Now, I didn't know," Blaine lied. "You knew," Harlan said. "So let me mash him," Darius growled. "No," Harlan said. He held up a hand. "No." "Why not?" Darius asked, annoyed. "Because," Harlan said, his voice calm and terrifyingly intelligent, "if you beat him, he becomes a victim. He goes to the infirmary, he gets sympathy. He sues the county. He wins." Harlan leaned in close to Blaine. "We don't want you to bleed, Ronan. We want you to wait." Harlan smiled, and it was the coldest thing Blaine had ever seen. "We're just going to watch you," Harlan said to the room. "Nobody touches him. Nobody speaks to him. We just watch." And they did. For hours, men stood or sat in a circle around Blaine. They didn't hit him. They didn't touch him. They just stared. They whispered about what they would do to him if they could. They described in graphic detail the violence they were holding back. Blaine sat in the corner, his knees pulled to his chest, weeping. The psychological pressure was heavier than any beating. Every time someone moved, he flinched. Every time someone laughed, he thought it was the end. He was trapped in a cage of his own making, surrounded by the ghosts of his cruelty. By the time the guards finally came to transfer him to solitary, Ronan Blaine had pissed himself. He was broken, not by a fist, but by the crushing weight of his own karma. While Blaine was disintegrating in the county jail, Serena Voss was sitting in a plush, leather chair in the office of Hale and Novak, the most prestigious civil rights firm in the state. She wasn't wearing a wig. She refused to cover her head. She wore a silk scarf loosely draped around her neck, but her shorn skull was visible, a badge of her ordeal. Across from her sat Lila Hale. Lila was sharp as a tack and known in the legal community as the Velvet Guillotine. She smiled at Serena. "You're trending in countries," Lila said, sliding an iPad across the mahogany desk. On the screen was a Twitter feed. The hashtag the bald judge was #1 worldwide. There was fan art of Serena as a warrior queen. There were TikToks of women shaving their heads in solidarity. "I don't care about the trends, Lila," Serena said, pushing the iPad away. "I care about the precedent." "We have them," Lila said. "The city attorney called. They are offering millions. No admission of guilt. Standard NDA. Quick settlement." Serena took a sip of tea. "Tell them to go to hell." Lila's smile widened. "I was hoping you'd say that." "I don't want their money," Serena said, leaning forward. "I want Blaine's pension. I want the chief's resignation for allowing a culture of stats oversight. And I want a federal consent decree mandating independent oversight of that department." "That's a war, Serena," Lila warned. "They will dig into your life. They will try to say you were agitated. They will try to smear you." "Let them try," Serena said. "I have nothing to hide, and I have the video." "The video is potent," Lila agreed. But there's more. The district attorney is upgrading the charges against Blaine. They found his trophy stash. Serena froze. Trophy stash? In his locker, Lila said grimly. They found a box, zip ties, a taser cartridge, and locks of hair. He's done this before. Serena, you weren't the first. You were just the first one with the power to fight back. Serena felt a wave of nausea followed by a surge of righteous fury. Then we don't just sue him, we bury him. Meanwhile, in a cramped, windowless interview room at the jail, Ronan Blaine sat opposite his court-appointed attorney. He had expected a seasoned public defender, maybe someone tired but experienced. Instead, the door opened and a young man walked in. He looked young. His suit was ill-fitting, polyester and slightly shiny at the elbows. He carried a briefcase that had seen better days. Blaine looked at him and groaned. You gotta be kidding me. You're my lawyer? You look like you're still in law school. The young man sat down. He didn't look intimidated. He opened his file. My name is Tariq Novak, the lawyer said. His voice was quiet. Novak? Blaine squinted. I know that name. I know. You should, Tariq said. He didn't look up from his papers. You arrested my father, domestic disturbance. You tased him while he was having a diabetic seizure. He died in custody. The room seemed to drop degrees. Blaine's mouth went dry. Conflict of interest, Blaine gasped, standing up. I want a new lawyer. You can't represent me. You'll throw the case. Sit down, Mr. Blaine, Tariq said, finally looking up. His eyes were incredibly sad. I filed a motion to recuse myself. I told the judge about our history. I told him I couldn't be impartial and asked, desperate. And Judge Voss, who is overseeing the administrative assignment of counsel for this district, denied the motion. Tariq said calmly. She what? She said that in a rural district with limited public defenders, we all have to do our duty regardless of personal feelings. She said she trusts my professionalism. Tariq leaned forward. And she's right. I am a professional. I will defend you to the best of my ability because I believe in the Constitution. The same Constitution you used as a doormat. Blaine stared at him, horrified. This was the ultimate revenge. Serena hadn't just sued him. She had placed his fate in the hands of a man who had every reason to hate him. Knowing that Tariq's moral code would force him to do a good job, but that Blaine would spend every second terrified that he wouldn't. So, Tariq clicked his pen. Let's look at your options. The DA is offering a plea deal. A deal? Blaine asked, hope rising. Probation? Suspended sentence? Years, Tariq said flatly. Years, Blaine screamed. For a haircut? For kidnapping, Tariq corrected him. When you refused to let her leave? When you moved her to a second location, the delousing room, without probable cause, and when you held her there against her will, that fits the statutory definition of kidnapping in the first degree, plus aggravated assault, plus civil rights violations, plus the hate crime enhancement they are adding. Hate crime. You targeted a black woman and shaved her head. The symbolism isn't lost on the prosecutor, Ronan. It's reminiscent of historical dehumanization tactics. They are going to paint you as a monster, and frankly, they don't have to use much paint. Blaine slumped in his chair. What happens if I go to trial? We lose, Tariq said simply. We lose and you get years, maybe more, and you serve it in a maximum security facility where the population looks like the woman you assaulted. Tariq closed the file. I suggest you take the deal, Ronan. It's the only mercy you're going to get. Blaine put his head on the metal table and began to sob. Deep, ugly, heaving sobs. I just wanted to teach her a lesson, he choked out. She was so arrogant. She was driving that Lexus like she owned the road. She didn't own the road, Tariq said, standing up and buttoning his cheap suit jacket. She owned the law, and you just reminded everyone why the law exists. Tariq knocked on the door for the guard. I'll give you hours to decide on the plea, Tariq said as the door opened. Try to get some sleep. I hear the intake tank is loud. He walked out, leaving Blaine alone in the silent room. The twist wasn't just that he was caught. It was that the very system he had manipulated, the public defenders, the plea deals, the technicalities, was now a perfectly designed machine, grinding him into dust. Months had passed since the rainstorm on Route 9. The seasons had turned, and the gray chill had given way to the blinding, humid heat of a Georgia summer. The courtroom for the sentencing of Ronan Blaine was different from the one Serena presided over. This was Courtroom 1, the big house reserved for high-profile criminal cases. The gallery was overflowing. There were activists in Justice for Serena t-shirts. There were curious citizens. There were law students. And in the back row, silent and grim, were a handful of police officers, not there to support Blaine, but to witness the burial of their department's darkest chapter. Judge Lila Novak sat on the bench. She was a woman with a face like a dried apple and a reputation for sentences that left scorch marks. She didn't look at the cameras. She looked only at the law. Ronan Blaine sat at the defense table. The change in him was absolute. The bulk was gone. The prison diet and the constant gnawing terror of protective custody had stripped weight from his frame. His skin was pasty, the color of uncooked dough. But the most striking detail was his head. He was bald. It wasn't a fashion choice. In the county jail, lice had actually broken out in the C block. The guards, citing the very protocol Blaine had abused, had shaved every inmate in the wing. Karma hadn't just knocked on his door. It had kicked it in and raided his fridge. Tariq Novak, the young public defender, stood up. He looked tired. He had fought hard, ensuring Blaine's rights were protected, even when Blaine spat insults at him. Your Honor, Tariq said, his voice steady. My client enters a plea of guilty to all charges. We ask for leniency based on his years of prior service and his obviously deteriorated mental state. Judge Novak peered over her spectacles. The court notes the plea. Does the victim wish to make a statement? Serena stood. The room went silent. The air conditioning hummed, a low drone beneath the tension. She walked to the podium. She didn't look at Blaine. She looked at the judge. Your Honor, Serena began. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried to the back of the room without a microphone. For months, I have woken up every morning and looked in the mirror. I have watched my hair grow back millimeter by millimeter. It is a slow process, painfully slow. She paused, gripping the edges of the podium. Mr. Blaine didn't just cut protein strands. He didn't just alter my appearance. He attempted to strip me of my identity. He saw a black woman in a position of power, and it offended his worldview so deeply that he felt compelled to reduce me to a physical object. He wanted to make me clean by his standards, which meant stripping me of my culture, my dignity, and my autonomy. She turned slowly, finally looking at Blaine. He flinched, refusing to meet her eyes. You failed, Ronan, she said. You didn't break me. You sharpened me. Because of you, the Voss precedent is now being taught in law schools across the country. Because of you, the entire intake procedure for this state has been overhauled. You wanted to be a hammer. Well, you were. You were the hammer that broke the glass ceiling on police corruption in this county. She turned back to the judge. I don't ask for vengeance, Your Honor. Vengeance is fleeting. I ask for justice, and justice in this case requires that Mr. Blaine experience the full weight of the helplessness he inflicted on me. He needs to know what it feels like to be a number, to be processed, to be owned by the state. She sat down. Judge Novak nodded. She shuffled her papers. The rustling sound was like dry leaves in a graveyard. Ronan Blaine, the judge said, please stand. Blaine stood, his legs shaking so badly he had to lean on the table. You have pleaded guilty to kidnapping in the first degree, aggravated assault, and deprivation of rights. You betrayed your badge. You betrayed your oath. And you betrayed the citizens of this county. The judge leaned forward. I am sentencing you to years in the state penitentiary without the possibility of parole for the first. Blaine let out a sob, a strangled, wet sound. Furthermore, the judge continued, her eyes glinting with a hard light, I am recommending that you be placed in the sprawling correctional facility at Jackson, specifically the textile manufacturing wing. Blaine's head snapped up. The textile wing, it was famous in the prison system. It was where inmates worked all day processing raw cotton and weaving uniforms. It was hot, grueling, back-breaking work, but that wasn't the twist. And, Judge Novak added, since you have such an affinity for hygiene and grooming, I am assigning you to the facility's barber training program. The courtroom gasped. A ripple of laughter, dark and satisfied, ran through the gallery. You will spend your days cutting the hair of other men, Mr. Blaine, the judge said, under strict supervision. You will learn the service of others. You will learn humility. And every time you hold a pair of clippers, you will remember the woman who put you there. Bam! The gavel came down. Court is adjourned. 2 bailiffs moved in. They grabbed Blaine by the arms. He didn't fight. He was a hollow shell. As they dragged him out the side door, he looked back one last time. He saw Serena Voss standing in the center of the room, bathed in the light from the high windows. She wasn't smiling. She was simply watching him go. The aftermath. Later, Serena sat in her chambers. The Thorne corruption trial had concluded. Harlan Thorne had been convicted on counts of bribery and fraud, largely thanks to the evidence Serena had admitted on that fateful morning. He was going to prison. There was a knock on her door. It was Captain Tariq Lang. He looked older, tired. Judge, he said, holding his hat. I just wanted to let you know, was processed at Jackson. And? Serena asked, not looking up from her paperwork. And he's in the barber program, Lang said, a hint of a grim smile on his face. Word is his first customer was Darius Hale. Apparently Darius got transferred there. Serena stopped writing. She looked out the window at the Georgia skyline. Did he survive the haircut? She asked. He did, Lang said. But I hear Blaine's hands were shaking so bad he gave Darius the worst fade in history. Darius made him sweep the floor with a toothbrush. And now Serena allowed herself a small, rare smile. Justice is a slow wheel, Captain, she said, but it grinds exceedingly fine. She picked up her pen. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a docket to clear, and I have an appointment. Doctor? Lang asked. No, Serena said, touching her short, curly hair. My stylist. We're trying a new color. Maybe red, something fiery. She signed the document in front of her. The ink was black and permanent. Outside the sun was shining. The storm was over, and Serena Voss was just getting started. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of Sergeant Ronan Blaine, a man who thought a badge gave him the right to be a bully, and a woman who showed him that true power doesn't come from a uniform. It comes from the spine. It's a terrifying reminder of how quickly authority can turn into abuse, but also a satisfying testament that sometimes, just sometimes, the universe balances the scales. Blaine wanted to strip away a judge's dignity, but in the end, he only stripped away his own freedom. He spent minutes trying to break her, and now he has years to think about why he failed. What would you have done if you were in Judge Voss's shoes? Would you have kept your cool, or would you have fought back right there on the road? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring the notification bell so you'll never miss a story. We have a crazy one coming up about a landlord who evicted a tenant only to find out the tenant owned the building. You don't want to miss it. Stay safe, stay kind, and remember, karma is always watching.